This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. And if you are hearing our voices or seeing our faces, if you're watching on YouTube, welcome to the Friday edition of the CHGO Cubs podcast. It is Friday, October 20th. Brendan, the baseball playoffs rolling on. We have the championship series going on. The boisterous Philadelphia Phillies finally take an L in this championship series. First game in Arizona. I know a favorite ballpark of yours. Houston, Texas, battling for the entire state, I believe, as well as the American League Championship, and a slow trickle of Cubs rumors so far to kind of pace the offseason. But we're close, Brendan. It's almost the World Series, which means it's almost time for the offseason to kick into gear.
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want it to start. I feel so light, so happy, so free, not worrying about this team right now. So I'm enjoying just like the breather, the vacation of not following this team on the day-to-day basis, even though I still kind of do, even though I'm kind of lying to you right now in denial, but I'm not stressing about the day-to-day.
Right. This is also a little inside baseball for everybody. This is the same person who texted me. I think it was last night at 10 p.m. Central Time.
It was not
just
10 p.m.
Wild thoughts about the
It was not 10 p.m. That was not my fault. I was instigated by a friend of ours, so not my fault.
Right.
They were right comments though. Tell me where the lie was in that.
Well, I think to your point, I think a lot of us are excited for this offseason. I'm excited for this offseason. But that being said, as we've discussed, a lot of work to do. And, we'll get into some of that today. One of the first things I want to talk about, some of the rumors with the Boston Red Sox and Craig Breslow. And I think Brendan is the perfect person to ask kind of, there's still just rumors at this point, but he does have very strong ties there. I believe he and his family still live there. And there's a lot of smoke to that fire.
Yeah.
So something we should talk about. And of course, by the time you listen to this, he may have been hired or declined the position. So always keep up to date.
It's probably going to happen.
So I do want to talk about that because I think you're, maybe uniquely qualified to at least offer
a compliment from you.
I could make it backhand. I didn't finish.
Well, you kind of did with that facial reaction.
I do want to talk about that just in case it does happen. Want to talk about the effect that might have, or maybe some changes might have on the pitching infrastructure, the pitching staff, and I think that'll lead us into a discussion, kind of just looking at the state of the Cubs pitching staff, and then looking at the arbitration projections, the salary projections for next year, getting into some of the luxury tax stuff. I don't know that we're going to be able to cover all of it in one episode, but I think if we're looking at benefits of the Cubs not playing, and there are none, right? We want them in the playoffs all the time. But for our purposes, heading into what should be a big offseason, or what needs to be a big offseason, right, for this organization, it does give us some time to kind of lay the groundwork for what is going to happen when the gates open and players can be traded, players can be signed. We're going to get some option decisions, things like that. So want to touch on some of that, at least in this week's episode.
Yeah.
First, though, Brendan, I want to know what is on the table for you. What are you going to do if Dansby Swanson and or Nico Horner do not win their respective Gold Gloves? Both were nominated. What happens? And before anybody asks, I just don't think Brendan cares that much whether Ian Happ also wins his second Gold Glove.
I'm done following baseball. This will be the last podcast I ever do. You have to find a new podcast. I may move out of the country. Right. I may move. I've always wanted to move to like desert, cold environment, just letting myself be in isolation, I may move to the North Pole, South Pole. I may be
Good.
done. This may be it for me.
Now, notoriously, I think you are on record quite frequently as being a Wilson man.
I am.
So
Wilson, not Contreras. Wilson.
No, the glove
2000.
brand.
Yeah,
Yes,
just
A2000.
just clarifying
Yes,
that. Well, that's the issue. The issue is that it's sponsored by Rawlings. So there's an inherent degree of corruption already. So of course, Nico did not win it last year. The only reason that Dansby won it last year, because he was just too good. They would have been outed if he did not win the Gold Glove last year. So when you have some of the fringe ratings, they give it to the Rawlings guy. That's what happens. And those gloves suck, by the way. Let me tell you. Those Rawlings gloves are floppy pancakes. Not good.
I did not. I don't have a baseball history.
You did not
like
what,
you do.
Corey? You did not what? Say it.
I did not play baseball.
You did not play baseball. Okay.
I did not.
Yeah.
Unlike
I
Brendan, who was a star shortstop, and he's happy to remind you of that.
I was.
Yada, yada. I did work in multiple MLB front offices, but I digress.
But can you turn a double play? Can you turn a double play? You cannot. No.
With Dansby, I think I could. I think he could pull it out of me.
Maybe he.
I fed a lot of BP. I think I could feed him coming toward the bag, and he handles the rest. I think I could do that.
Weren't you a coach for one game? Not to get too off track here, but you were a coach for one game, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, there was sort of loose rules down there, but I did do some bench.
Did you wear your baseball pants
in the Dominican
high
Republic
or low? Were you a high socks guy or low socks guy?
I think low. I didn't have them. I didn't have the full. This was a spur of the moment thing, you know.
Okay.
So.
Well, you always got to be ready.
I was down there to do scouting and player development, not to be in the dugout. It's a long story of how I ended up in there, but yeah.
And now you're talking to me on a Thursday night. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, and actually, just as a fun tidbit, I actually do have somewhat of a rooting interest. I don't know him at all, and I barely knew him even when we were at the complex together, but I did live at the complex in Boca Chica in the Dominican Republic with the Texas Rangers when I was working for them with Jose Leclerc, who now closes games for the Texas Rangers. So
would he remember your name?
No way.
Okay.
No.
Maybe your face?
We interacted with the players a lot, but there's obviously a lot of players at those complexes, working and doing all that stuff. And so, this was at this point, 10 years ago? Over 10 years ago?
Longer than that.
So, no way.
We're getting old.
But at the time, I did kind of know him and stuff like that. The main point being, he was always a very nice guy, and I have no reason not to root for him. So, I don't really have a rooting interest left. Our enemies are gone. The Brewers are gone. Other enemies. But yeah, I'm happy for Jose Leclerc. So he was always a nice guy. So as far as I know.
Well, he's the reason he's having success because of you. You helped him get to that point.
Absolutely.
So the Rangers owe you a potential ring if they win.
I will take it.
Yeah.
Anyway, very off the rails here in the first 8 minutes. But the last week, you and I were deep in the weeds yelling about David Ross by this point already. So I actually think this is an improvement.
We're doing well. We're doing really
listeners. Just finishing up before we get into some of this Craig Breslow stuff on the Gold Glove stuff. This is all, who cares, right? But as we said,
I kind of care about this one.
Well, meaning they're making up the voting. Sometimes it doesn't really track with who may actually be the best, whatever, right? As we talked about with Ian Happ last year, though, that was an example of a guy who had worked really hard to improve at a position and found himself in a spot where he was a lot better, obviously. And you wanted him to win that, to kind of recognize that. It's a cool thing. A lot of the players will add a patch or a stitch to their glove. When they do the defensive alignment on the broadcast, you get the gold shine on you, right? If you're one of those guys. So for Nico in particular, right? He's got to get one. He's earned it. He's so good at this.
Yeah.
I know he's got some, good competition at there with Stott. And I think Stott is the one who's probably his best competition of the three. But would like to see Nico win it. He's worked very hard. He's changed positions, obviously, with the signing of Dansby, and he's put in the work. So would like to see him honored and kind of get those flowers.
He needs it. I mean, he was snubbed last year. I don't even think he was a finalist. I think Xander Bogaerts was the third finalist at shortstop. Correct me if I'm wrong. But to your point about Ian Happ and winning that Gold Glove, those awards do matter. They validate the players' efforts. They talk about it. And in hindsight, when these players tell stories about their careers, they'll reference those awards. I reference my awards when I played baseball. Like they mean they mean something,
When it can make these guys money too. I mean, obviously Nico's got himself an extension, but like for guys that are arbitration players, like this is stuff that gets brought up in those hearings.
You were part of those hearings back in the day. You were telling me this, right?
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it does matter. So
it was me versus David Robertson. So apologies to David Robertson. I do think myself and the New York Yankees won that case. So apologies to David.
You won the case, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a lot, and that was a long time ago too. Those have changed, but a much more like rudimentary process than I think a lot of people would realize. Like it's not a battle of like WRC plus in WAR necessarily, right? Like if you can get that extra RBI, you want that extra RBI because it might make you some extra money.
Well, I don't think like Kyle Schwarber's camp will ever use WAR, right? But some of those playoffs,
right,
home runs, not to get too off the rails, but
all right. So I mean, if you wanted to continue talking about my baseball career from 15 years ago, we can do that, but I don't think we want to do that.
Do you have a resume that you can send me? I can look it up.
I can send it to you. Let's talk about Craig Breslow, though. So we sort of heard these rumors in the first place earlier this offseason. I think it was from Bruce Levine, and then Sahadev Sharma of The Athletic was immediately like, I have not heard this. Like, I'm getting denials on this that they've spoke. But that was maybe already a month ago, maybe even longer than that. Recently, it sounds like there was confirmation of interest and interviews and things like that. And currently for the Cubs, if you don't know, he is an assistant general manager, of which the Cubs have multiple, vice president, and the director of pitching. So he oversees this entire infrastructure that we always talk about, right? It sounds like there's a number of possibilities if he were to go to Boston. The initial rumor that Bruce reported, I think, and Sahadev was shooting down was that he was interviewing for like a lateral move, right? To do this, but for the Red Sox, his old team, again, where I think he and his family live, strong connections, things like that. The reports now are that he's in the conversation for potentially being a GM under somebody or some type of upward movement for Craig Breslow. So the first question, you I think have dialed in on this pitching infrastructure and the pitch lab and all this stuff more than most people. Can you try to articulate for the listeners or viewers on YouTube, like what does he do? What did he do for the Chicago Cubs? What does he mean for the Chicago Cubs? And I think as part of a longer answer, like the initial kind of reaction if they were to lose this person.
I'll first start with the initial reaction. That is disappointing, but the outcry, if you want to be extreme about it, I don't think it's quite justified. The reason being is just so many talented people in baseball that just need an opportunity. And in terms of what he does and why I don't think it's as justified to be super concerned about it, when I try to understand the pitching infrastructure and the main guys, the directors, whatever titles you want to ascribe to those folks, what I'm told from other teams who have similar hierarchies who are quite successful is that the main guy establishes the principles, establishes the general protocols. And then on a day-to-day basis, that director, whether it be Breslow or from other teams, they set up daily Zoom calls with coaches. They fly to the different affiliates. They catch up on goals that the coaches are trying to achieve with their players, ensuring that the protocol that was prescribed is being efficiently followed. And they're overseeing and directing it all and ensuring that the staff is capable of carrying out a unified vision. That involves, in some cases, several coordinators. It involves coaches, multiple coaches across individual levels from A-ball, AA, AAA, the fall league, even having guys there to ensure their pitchers are performing optimally. The ACL, Dominican league as well. It's very, very multifaceted, but the director is ensuring that the general protocols are being followed. Now,
so if I well, hopefully it works as a format, but maybe I'll interject with some questions as you go.
Okay.
If not, then I won't do that. But a question I had just to start there. So, like, for example, when we see the Cubs doing something in recent years, like their usage of sinkers up in the zone, which is something that other teams and pundits, et cetera, at various times have been like, the Cubs are doing something kind of differently than everybody else. This isn't it. Even if that is not necessarily a mindset that comes straight from Craig Breslow, he is the person that sort of enforces that paradigm throughout the organization, right?
Yeah.
If we're going to have a strategy that we like, that we're going to teach, it starts with him and he disseminates that downward. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a collaborative effort. From what I've seen, I've gotten to play around with some of these databases and softwares teams build for their players and coaches, so I can play around and see what's going on. And it's not as cookie cutter as like, oh, you have a good sinker, let's change the location. It's not quite like that. It's leveraging unique strengths of coaches and players to yield a pitch type that has a high probability of success. So if you take a step back and not focus on the sinkers or sweepers, it's more of, okay, this person has a certain mechanical trait that if you change it, because that natural mechanical trait is easy for the pitcher, what is the likelihood that a tweak increases the amount of whiffs, which then by default increases your ability to move through the system fast. And so it's those types of features that the director is trying to collaboratively find and then achieve. But ultimately, it's not like, this is my opinion now, I don't think the resources and the people and the talent is as scarce as it's made out to be. From Craig Breslow's perspective, he deserves the money because you have the precedent of success where he's done this with the Cubs. But I've been around folks who just need a chance, whether they're analysts or whether they're coaches, and they very clearly are obsessive and very hard workers, and they can accomplish what they set out to do in their unique way. From my perspective, when it comes to, let's say, like algorithm development or any type of like statistical approach, I think it's good to shake things up. Like, that's just where I fall into. Like, from a non-baseball perspective, some of my responsibilities from non-baseball perspective, have to be like making new things. And sometimes when you get in these echo chambers, not saying the Cubs are, but sometimes you need to be kind of slapped in the face a little bit, and you need like different perspectives, and it just promotes thinking a little bit differently. And I think with like the pitching side of things, of course, you have all these different pitch models and all the stuff models and all the stuff graders. And we know what kind of works, right? We know like, oh, if you add 5 inches of horizontal break, then you're gonna increase the percentage of whiffs by this amount. Now, how do you go about doing that? I think that right now is so established, and I think what needs to, generally speaking, the way to keep moving things forward is just to keep pushing the boundaries. And I think one massive way to do that is you take what's working, which is Breslow's foundation. You take what's working and you just grow on top of that. Yeah, you need a new director. Yeah, there's some risk involved in that. Yeah, the preferred path forward is to keep him. But you have an opportunity to continue to use what you've been using. All the resources are still there. And then you get a new perspective where you grow on that. That is actually kind of unique. And it may not be as bad as you think It is. And there were breakages in the system. It's not to say that everything the Cubs were doing are perfect. There were
Yeah.
problems that need to be addressed. And I am actually encouraged that we may have an outside voice to kind of address some of those breakages.
Yeah, and I mean, you would also hope that for a variety of reasons, the Cubs are a destination. And, if they're, maybe they just move people up, right? Maybe Daniel Moskos is put in charge of this, or guys that are already in the organization,
That's fine
right?
too.
But then you still would bring in new voices below those people, et cetera. And you would hope that the Chicago Cubs are capable of attracting those top minds, right?
Yeah.
Like just the Red Sox are calling to Craig Breslow because he has a very strong attachment there, right? With the organization, with the city, with that whole situation.
I mean, his family is
And
from
they're
there. It's a
right,
good,
and
it's a good
they're
situation
also
for him.
obviously potentially, we don't know the exact rumors that are going on, potentially offering him a promotion, a
Yeah.
potentially significant one. But you would also hope that the Cubs, in that same way, can reach out to other people and bring in new voices that are also very talented, and you kind of shift things around. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think from an outside perspective of not having as fine of an understanding of what everybody's doing in these roles, there's obviously risk, right? He's done the pitching has obviously improved organizationally, especially from where this organization was many years ago, right? Under Craig Breslow, they've been innovating more. They've caught up in a lot of different areas of the league that I think we felt as an organization they were behind on for a lot of time. And a lot of that has been under Craig Breslow. There's also the risk that if he goes to an organization, he wants to bring some of his folks with him, right? So how many of these, people that we talk about all the time, Tommy Hotovy, the aforementioned Daniel Moskos, et cetera, does Craig invite to join him in Boston, right? Like, you never know with stuff like that, but there's always risks, and there's always risks that you bring in somebody whose new perspective stinks, right? But I do agree with you that I think it's immediately reacted upon by a lot of people reading about it as like this catastrophic thing that can't happen. And I think it's good for you to put that perspective of like, well, not necessarily, right? Like there's a lot that goes into it, and there can actually be good outcomes from this. As you said, when you have somebody leading this and your organization is trending in so many right directions, you would prefer not to lose these people. But this is part of the game, right? This is part of how these things work. It happens to every organization, whether it's people on the coaching staff that get another opportunity, whether it's people in the front office, et cetera. Like, this is just part of the game. So you just have to hope that the potential good outcomes are ways that Jed Hoyer and his front office are able to find themselves into.
But it's not, and to that point, this is natural. This is how it always is going to be. You're going to have guys who want to work their way up. Like Tommy Hotovy will not be here forever. Tommy Hotovy could find himself as recently or as soon as next year in a similar role that Craig Breslow currently operates with the Cubs.
Offered a managing job.
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah, we don't know.
And to Theo's earlier point, he talked about things in like 10-year windows, where after 10 years, it's time to move on. 10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
I think in some of like the non-baseball spheres, it's like 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years, you learn something, you move on, you give your resources, next guy comes in, and you keep evolving. Now it's up to Jed and Carter to continue the foundation of what was working and get people in who can then evolve that, not take it away, but evolve it and make it the best version of itself. But to Jed's credit and Carter's credit, they do have a history of doing this. I will say that. Whereas Theo, although he did hire, Tommy and Craig was part of that front office, like ultimately Jed did identify, hey, these are guys that are having success. Let's give them more influence, and it worked. So there is a precedence with this front office for doing that. So I think that is encouraging.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe this is also an area where we start to see, maybe a more tangible way of seeing some of the effect of bringing in Carter Hawkins, right? Carter Hawkins, one of the things that he was, kind of hallmarked on his resume was his work in previous organizations with identifying, drafting, developing pitching, and usually doing so with a lesser budget than they have now. So, perhaps this is an opportunity for him to flex those muscles and say, okay, I see this foundation. Here's what we're building, and I know the people or the direction to kind of continue taking
And I'm kind of curious about it. Like, again, it's not my preferred path forward. I'm not saying that. But there's risk involved. But I do think if you look at the potential outcomes, of course, you want to have stability and you know what you get at Breslow. But I do think there are potential outcomes where it becomes better. Like, I really genuinely believe, I'm not just blowing smoke. Now, you accept some of the risk, and the risk is you bring someone in and you kind of break some of the unified visions. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. I think kind of the basis of why they don't like Breslow going. But I do think there are scenarios where this gets better. In a lot of the situations in AAA and some of the command issues and walk rates, like, who knows, man? Like, it's one of those situations where you bring someone in and you don't know what you're missing. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And this could be one of those situations.
I think it's also one of those things where it's like ultimately like a lot of good and there's obvious risk, but it also, the pitching throughout the entire organization wasn't perfect, right? It's not a situation where it's like, oh no, everything is perfect. This can happen, right? It's like, no, maybe you can get better in certain areas.
And
do we feel like the Cubs have the best pitching infrastructure in the game of baseball? I don't think so, right? No. They don't have that reputation. So, and again, that's not to say that this doesn't provide the opportunity that it gets worse, but change can be good. And we said this when we were talking about some of those coaching staff changes on David Ross's coaching staff, right? Like, it's not it feels like a very silly thing to say that there could be good outcomes or it could be bad outcomes, right? Come to the CHGO Cubs podcast for this brilliant analysis. Could be good, could be bad. I don't know.
Could be interesting.
But, it is one of those things where, as you said, it is part of the game. Coaches, players, front office people work to get a better job, and you have to be prepared for that. There's very few organizations that have the same people, the same, types of things. And sometimes that runs its course. Like, go across and look at New York, right? Like, Brian Cashman has been there forever, a revered figure in New York sports. But you get the sense out of a lot of people that they'd kind of like to see some change. Doesn't mean it couldn't get worse, but I think it's the fan base and the sense you get there is, maybe it would be time to try something else instead of what we've been doing for the last 30 years, literally, right? Like, So it is part of that. And I was thinking when you were talking about it, just of a funny way of explaining it, but I feel like, for a lot of years, you and I did a very good Cubs podcast. We needed to bring the vibes even higher, right? You and I aren't going to drink a beer bat on camera after
Actually,
wins.
I did drink a beer bat.
Well, yeah, but after, so enter Cody Delmendo, right? Like, you have to level up, right? Sometimes you need to continue adding on the foundation.
Bring in Ryan, bring in Jared, bring in Luke.
Yeah.
Bring them all. Yeah,
right.
That's what it is.
So I want to jump into our first ad break here, and we can kind of continue this conversation. Also, possibly, if you're really hoping Craig Breslow stays, I'll just say you're welcome right now, because the odds, when Brendan and I have conversations like this, right? People are going to be, they had a 20-minute conversation about the pitching infrastructure and Craig Breslow. He will announce tomorrow morning that he's staying with the Cubs, and this conversation will be completely obsolete.
Yeah.
And everything we said,
welcome, everyone.
We'll just revert back and be like, oh, whew, thank you, he's staying. That would have been bad, right? That's just how these things work.
Not good. Yeah, exactly.
So we will be back, though. Touch on that a little bit, and then we want to get into some of the payroll, luxury tax, roster projections, et cetera, et cetera.
First break here from Circa Sportsbook. Games will strive to be at a -110 split with Circa Sports menu, unlike other sportsbooks, which may use -115 or -120. Circa keeps as little money as possible on large market bets, especially compared to other books. Circa Sports does not limit players based on their winnings. Every player has the same limits, unlike other books who do limit winning players. There are real people behind the Circa Sports brand who resolve issues in a timely fashion, unlike other books who use chatbots. All aspects of the app are being run by the same team that runs the main Circa Sportsbook at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Download the Circus Sports Illinois at circusports.com/Illinois-app to sign up today. Also be on the lookout for Circa events, watch parties, and tailgates. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-426-2537, text GAMB to 833-234, or visit areyoureallywinning.com. Second break here from Game Time. You should not have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Again, last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Actually, I have a lot of friends in Arizona. They use Game Time to go to the third game of the NLCS. You saw all those cost affordable prices at Chase Field. Game Time was the app to get those tickets. I had literally 3 friends say, hey, we're using your app to get these tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets like those NLCS tickets right up to the start of the event. You can find exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CHGO for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, Brendan. So any final thoughts on that? Or I mean, and maybe it's a good transition, but do you feel like if fans didn't know who Craig Breslow was, right? And maybe they read these rumors and they're like, I didn't even know who this guy was, or I don't know what the director of pitching does, whatever. Do you think that there could be like a visible effect next year that people could see and be like, oh, something is different? Or is it too big in terms of like the organizational effect and things like that for something like that to take notice? As we go into this offseason and prepare, we look at this rotation. Like we were talking the other day in the studio about how, like, if Stroman accepts his option, if they decide to bring Kyle Hendricks back, like you're still missing a top of the rotation arm to pair along with Justin Steele, kind of watching these teams in the playoffs. But you have good depth with guys like Assad and Wicks, like, kind of figuring out their roles and things like that. But like, as we transition to all of that, do you think that there would be kind of a noticeable effect of any of these changes, or is too much of it kind of under the radar? And unless you're picking up on, hey, the team as a whole is throwing more, I don't know, change-ups in the dirt to left-handed hitters, you're just not going to notice this type of stuff.
Yeah, it's so big. You have so many coaches, so many coordinators, so many analysts. I would expect changes to not be drastic and noticeable. Then again, to the earlier point, you don't know what you don't know. You may get a director in that institutes some feature that brings about an unexpected result. I expect, given it's crazy to think about this. We are really only 3 months away from a lot of pitchers being in Mesa, ready to start their season. That's not that far away. So I imagine you won't see drastic changes, noticeable changes in February and March. If there is a new director, I think the first thing you'll notice is who's being hired. Are you sustaining your coordinators? Are you bringing in new coordinators? Are you making new roles? We saw that with the Cubs front office, where they carved out a new role for Craig Breslow. They carved out new coordinator openings. They carved out new R&D type openings. So I think if there is a new director, I'm looking towards what new roles are being opened up, because that might inform you what they're trying to accomplish. If there's no new roles opened up, they may just go with the status quo, reevaluate after next season. Jed did do that. Jed took over the presidency, had no GM for a year, granted COVID situation, but had no GM. You may want to take a year to reevaluate, continue what's working, and then reassess. But it's all up in the air at this point.
Okay. So fair enough. We will transition now. And I alluded before that you were texting me late one evening this week, and you
It
were.
was not 10 o'clock. It was like 6:30.
It was 3 in the morning. No, whatever. Fine.
I've also
Um,
never done that at 3 in the morning. It's been like
and you
1:30.
were. Oof, don't make me go look through. I'm sure I've gotten graphs from you, Pat. I would say minimum 1 in the morning, Chicago
Yeah,
time,
one
not your
sounds about
time.
right. That's true, actually. Maybe it
It
has been
sounds about
3
right, but when it's a plotted chart of Michael Fulmer's fastballs, it's a little weird. But anyway,
You love it. You love it.
it's unique. I'll tell you that. But what you were kept up at night about was thinking about the payroll, the luxury tax, the implications of it all. And, these are all things that we can talk about and worry about now. And, because I think once the doors open to free agency and trades and really front office's abilities to make these moves, sure, that's going to be part of the calculus, but we are going to be getting like a barrage of rumors, right? It's going to be too hard to keep your head on straight. Hopefully the Cubs are bringing in players and making moves, and you may not have time to be sitting there with your calculator or your Google spreadsheet kind of adding it all up minute to minute, right? Like we're going to be freaking out. You're going to get a Twitter alert from Ken Rosenthal that Cody Bellinger was spotted in a state that isn't Chicago, and it's going to send Cubs Twitter into an absolute panic. But talk to me. What are you feeling as we head into what were you dialed in on the other night?
I don't appreciate that you set the foundation as if I'm some crazy person freaking out about this situation. Like that's what it sounds like you're
It
trying
doesn't
to
really
do.
matter because everybody knows that.
That's also not true. People do not think I'm that crazy. Just saying.
Sure.
What I was thinking about, not freaking out about, just thinking out loud about was considering the arbitration projections, considering Stroman's likely opt-in. I'm assuming he's locked in. The payroll without Cody Bellinger, the range as it stands is 200 million to 210 million. MLB Trade Rumors had their offseason preview for the Cubs. They have them at 211 for their estimated payroll without Bellinger and without even, a lot of these other options picked up. So then I started thinking, okay, well, if you sign Bellinger, let's say you sign Bellinger for a $25 million annual average value contract, you're at the tax already. Like you're literally
The first level.
You're at the tax. And again, it may not be like exactly 237. So the way the taxes work, you have 237, then 257, and you keep going up by 20 million. And there's multiple tiers, but the first tier is 237. Second tier is 257. Third tier is 277. Above the 277, you lose 10 spots in your draft pick. So if you were expected to draft at 15, you're back to 25. And then the first level, so past 233, 0 to 20%. And then you get to 237, you get to 257 to 277, an additional 12%. And it keeps going up to 20% after 277. So it starts adding up, right? So if you're already at 237, if you sign Bellinger or even inching towards that, then presumably you have a lot of moves to make to ensure that your roster is capable of winning next year and accepting the overage on 237. And if you want to go over 257, let's say you sign Bellinger and then you bring in, I don't know, you trade for Pete Alonso, you trade for Juan Soto, sure, be crazy. That puts you in the second tier already at 257. And is the team good enough as constructed with just Bellinger and just a Pete Alonso with their pitching issues, right? You sign Kyle Hendricks in that scenario. You're inching towards 277 already. And then are you truly confident that that is going to solve every issue? Solving a lot of issues, but is it a surefire thing? You still have to shore up the bullpen. You still have to shore up some of the back end of the rotation still. It gets complicated. And that's what it leaves me unsettled. And it's a good way to contrast what we were talking about in the past few weeks, where you feel generally good about where this team is going, given their front office, given their pitching development, given their farm promotions, graduations, but it's under the assumption that those big moves will be made. And as we talk about this and discuss this in the context of the luxury tax, it strikes me as very ambitious and something that seems not likely, although it's possible, but it's not likely, as those are huge asks given where they are.
Yeah, well, so the first thing I would say is, one, the usual caveat of Brendan is explaining the luxury tax implications because that is how the front office and ownership in some respect are going to operate, right? Whether they care about the first threshold, the second threshold, it is part of their calculus. The caveat I'm offering is that, do you want to say, I feel like we can all just say it together, right? The Cubs are one of the most valuable franchises in the world. They shouldn't care, spend all the money, blah, blah. I know, right? They're going to operate in the real world, but I do want that out there that we don't care about the luxury tax. They do. That's why we're...
Just to add to that, my 10 seconds, the Dodgers this year, when under the luxury tax, they finished around $232 million, just slightly underneath it, to reset.
Yeah, kind of like
how
the
many
Yankees
times they go.
did.
Yeah, and
a few years ago.
If you think about it, the Dodgers and the Cubs had the same payroll basically, which is crazy to think about, and that kind of sets kind of where I'm thinking, like, how are the Dodgers performing that well?
They all won just as many playoff games.
And that's also true. But you know what I mean? But they're at the same type of cost commitment. And it just leaves me unsettled. That's a big it seems to be a big chasm.
Yeah. So that's my first thing, right? Because I always have to make sure that we're never accused of being Ricketts apologists.
I would spend
you know what I'm saying?
$1 billion on this team.
Yeah.
If I had the money.
I don't care about the luxury tax. Brendan doesn't. Cody doesn't. Luke doesn't. Ryan doesn't.
Well, I think Ryan might actually.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
You think he's a luxury tax guy?
I think he is. He strikes me as that.
I don't care. They should blow over it. As I always say, I'm a season ticket holder. I don't want to give them my money to then hear about, well, we don't want to pay the penalty. You think I want to hear that? Come on. We're all with each other in this. That it's not our money. Give it away to good players and go win playoff games. We want to have people talking about the Wrigley Field playoff environment, not Citizens Bank Park, right? Come on. But that's how they're going to operate, at least in some respect, right? It's going to inform what they're doing. The second thing I would say to that is I think we all know this. I think it's been part of the way that this has been discussed. I think that people have a high hope that they are going to build on where they were last year and continue the forward progress. But I think in a lot of those conversations, everybody has acknowledged that it's not exactly the easiest path to get there.
Yeah, which is weird.
And I've said before, I use this phrase a lot. It is a tough needle to thread, right? It is a very small hole that Jed is trying to fit these puzzle pieces into, right? That said, the immediate reaction I have to that, I know where you're coming from. I've seen these numbers. I'm aware of how it can get tricky, and I can already read the, PR cleaned up quotes from Jed where it's well, we feel like we got better and, we did spend money, right? We did spend money this offseason, but we're all looking at it we've seen this movie before, right? My position, at least at this point, in order to get better, in order to live up to this kind of mantra that they've all laid out, which is not making the playoffs, is not good enough, and it is not successful in anybody's book, they're going to have to figure it out, right? I don't get paid a, what is it, a 9-figure salary that Jed makes?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm doing the math of how many zeros that is. You're a numbers guy. I'm not. So I'm I don't know. Anyway,
It's like 7, but that's okay.
but it's like
9's a
they
lot.
get paid the big bucks to figure this stuff out. And whether that is going to involve clearing money in creative ways, attaching players in trades, things like that, figuring out how to maneuver these options and free agents and all this stuff, they're going to have to do it. And I know that sounds like a sort of almost like a cop-out of analysis on my part, but I don't get paid to figure it out. If they want to get better, they have to get more good players. They need more star players on this team, right? And if we're just looking at a money perspective, yeah, it gets tricky if you're going to look at some of those thresholds and say, well, we're willing to blow past the first one, which I definitely expect that they are, right? I would imagine that any hesitations they have would come from blowing past the second or third tax penalty, right? I think especially when you get those draft picks involved, the extra money, I can see them being wary of that. But that first one, I would expect them to blow past. And I think they need to. So it's a real consideration, and I know how they operate. I know how the ownership has operated in the past. But look, man, like you look at the roster, you look at the players available and how to kind of fix some of the holes that they have. They're going to have to do things that maybe make them uncomfortable, whether that's from a money perspective or moving players and receiving money back in exchange. Like other teams have had to figure their way out of situations like this, and they're going to have to do the same. Simply saying, well, we spent up to this one threshold and this is all we could afford, so I guess we, have Cody Bellinger, but that's it, right?
Well,
you guys
they've
want
done that.
It's not good enough. It's not going to be good enough.
That defined those Descalso signings in the late 2010s. They have had a history of doing this.
Sure.
Where you don't go over
the
go over
fear
those
is
taxes.
not unwarranted. I'm not
It's
saying
a legitimately warranted
Yeah.
fear.
The fear is not unwarranted at all. I'm not saying that, but I'm just kind of laying the clear gambit of, in order to get where they want to go, they are going to have to do some of these things. They're going to have to figure this stuff out. I think if you looked back, and I'm not at all excusing this, right? Like the lack of spending over the top cost this organization at least one more championship, right? I think minimum. I think most people would agree with that, right? But at least you looked at the 2018 team and said, well, this is a really good team.
It's actually a bold statement from you.
What?
One championship? You think they could have won one
Well,
more?
you can never guarantee a championship, but I think I'll rephrase that. It cost them a real legitimate shot at one, which I think they never ended up getting again, right?
Yeah. Well, the 2018, 2019, they could have gone for it and blown over that next year.
Yeah, right. And I think some of those moves would have set them up for 2021 even as well, right? For as weird as that played out. Not trying to relitigate that, but just trying to say, like, at least in 2018, like that team won 95 games. That was a very good team, even though they needed to spend further to be able to compete at that peak level, right? Especially getting into October.
Yeah.
That's not where this team is. Like, this roster is blatantly not that good. And so I know you weren't comparing them directly, but like they can't go with that this time. The fear is not unwarranted, but they just can't do it. They will not accomplish their goals if they don't spend over the tax or find some way to dump enough money that they can still add a bunch of good players and stay around whatever number they feel comfortable with. They just can't do it. So they're going to have to. So I share the concern. I know it. I've seen it. It is warranted. I just refuse. For now, I refuse to believe they're going to do it because they just can't. Jed Hoyer hasn't won anything.
Oh, trust me,
as
I'm
a
with
president.
You. He has to win next
show
year.
up, and they need to win a division. They need to get in the aspirations have got to be well beyond where we were this year, and we've talked about that a lot.
They aspire to that. Is a difference.
They know they have to do it. They have to spend money.
Of course.
Over this tax. Eat the penalties. They have no choice.
It's the path forward to competing is in addition to spending money in free agency. You can't just do it in free agency with this market. That's where I have the concern is, to your point, yes, spend money, but If you just signed Cody Bellinger and you bring back Kyle Hendricks' $16 million option, you are at $235 to $240 million already. You have the exact same roster as last year, and that wasn't good enough, right? So the concern that I have is getting trades, having creative moves to circumvent some of those concerns. And then when I start thinking about this, things start to snowball. But Drew Smiley, Tucker Barnhart, Trey Mancini, they really missed on those deals to the sum of $20 million. So they aspired for those three guys to be contributors for 2024. It's written in their contracts, and they missed very badly on $20 million. It's difficult. This is the margin of the elite front offices that are in the playoffs year in, year out, versus the front offices to have some turnover like the Cubs have been. So this is the front office that will define this overall direction.
Yeah. Well, in addition to the free agents, I was saying even if you trade for some guys, you make those moves, like they cost money too, right? Like depending on the moves you make, maybe not as much, but like you trade for Juan Soto, he's going to cost a lot of money.
Man, is our season dependent on Juan Soto? Like that's my point. It's like if you don't sign a Ted Williams-esque hitter, you're screwed. Is that really what this season is going to come down to? And then like there's two sides where you have Jed Hoyer who needs to win next year or his job might be in jeopardy. Like I understand that, but at the same time, do you treat 2024 as kind of another soft launching pad? And I don't think fans are willing to accept that. But I do think if you take away the job security, it's an easier argument to make that 2024 is a soft launching pad and not an all-in juggernaut go for it year. Am I wrong about that? Given everything,
I don't know. I don't know what they're aiming for. I really don't. I know that it's difficult to turn a team that didn't make the playoffs into a juggernaut, right? Like a top 2 or 3 World Series contender.
Clear-cut division winner next year. Yes.
And a team
big ass.
And a team that when they get in these playoffs, right, they have a legitimate chance to compete, right? The Phillies didn't win their division, and no one was talking about them the way they were talking about the Braves. But here they are, right? The Texas Rangers didn't win their division, and nobody talked about them like this juggernaut of a team.
But there's no Bryce Harpers or Corey Seagers or Marcus Semyons, dude. They're not there. You have to trade for him. This very different construction.
Figure it out.
Man, but do you have the confidence they can do that? Have they ever done that?
I'm going to repeat what I said in the beginning. They have to.
This is what prompts those late night texts.
Yeah, they have to.
Because they have to. And how it's difficult to balance when we say, yeah, I feel good about this team. But you have to go out and make these historically great trades. It doesn't make sense in my brain.
And I think, and I do want to get to our second ad break here. Of naturally, we're running long per usual.
53 minutes. That's
and Brendan's out of wine, so here we go.
Here we go.
At a Pearl Jam concert, this would be the good part when Eddie would go to the back and come back with the second bottle of wine, and that's how you knew, like, all right, we're into, we're here to party tonight.
Someday we'll go all the way.
Right. I think it kind of is. This conversation is underscored by the Cody Bellinger conversation, right?
It is.
Where a lot of people, will look at that and go like, he might get a big contract, maybe not as big as some people think, maybe bigger than other people think, but like you can't just re-sign him and call it a day, right? Like you have to add on to that production, or you know what I mean? Like you can't have Stroman pick up his option and bring back Hendricks and just be like, okay, cool. I think our rotation is good. Is it good enough? No, I don't think so. Not. I think it can compete in the division, but is it good enough to be a lock in the division to carry you through the playoffs? I don't think so. So yeah, I think the Bellinger thing kind of underscores this thing where it's like it might cost you a lot of money, and even just doing it doesn't answer all of the questions. And then what happens if you don't do it, right? It's, again, I never said it was going to be easy, but like, listen, man, like this is why these people make millions of dollars. Jed makes millions of dollars to run this team. Time to put on your, like, big boy Theo Epstein pants and figure out how to win a championship, right? Like, I don't know what else to say.
Listen, man, I don't know.
Put on your Theo Epstein, I'm getting drunk today gorilla suit and go build a damn championship roster, Jed. All right? It's not that hard.
Sure, it's not that hard, sure.
The gorilla was Boston. No, at Wrigley he was drinking through a bear head, wasn't he?
It was a bear head, yeah.
He was like drinking through the eye of a bear.
He escaped out of Boston in the gorilla suit.
Gorilla suit,
then
right.
He bought like a makeshift Clark costume when they won the World Series.
Right.
Which they did do, by the way. The Cubs won the World Series, if people do remember.
Yeah. I'm referencing like somebody took
Yeah.
a photo from like their rooftop of him on the bleachers, and I'm pretty sure
Celebrating
he's
the
pouring
World Series.
champagne through the eye hole
the
of
eye.
like of the bear head.
Yeah, Theo was unbelievable.
Okay.
All right. Let's do this ad break here. What is it? An hour in? Okay. Charlie the Bacon Guy, Corey. Charlie the Bacon Guy, based out of Woodridge, Illinois, makes craft bacon and bacon jams in over 30 different flavors. The bacon jams are all naturally cured, no fancy preservatives, free product. There aren't any ingredients that Charlie can't pronounce himself involved in the process, unlike most store-bought bacon. It's also vacuum sealed, freezes great. Bacon lasts up to 45 days in the fridge, 6 months in the freezer. Bacon jam, I've heard, in the studio lasts not even 60 days in the fridge, or in some cases, if Luke is there, Cody's there, like 1 day, 20 seconds. But it does, if you do want to keep it, 6 months in the freezer. Some of the favorites are maple pepper, jalapeno, garlic, Old Bay, rosemary. Some traditional flavors are the original, the bourbon, the spicy varieties. The bacon jam does go perfectly on anything: scrambled eggs, toast, crackers, burgers, grilled cheese, cinnamon rolls, or Charlie's favorite, just the spoon. He will deliver to you, meet you halfway, or even ship it. He makes the bacon so you can bring it home. You can also contact Charlie at Charlie the Bacon Guy. Check out the merch on Instagram, on Twitter at CZ the Bacon Guy, or on email. You can email him directly at charliethebaconguy@gmail.com. Another ad break here from Ray Chevy. Are you in the market for a new or used vehicle? If you are, then we have some great news for you, because Ray Chevy in Fox Lake has joined the CHGO team. And we were talking to the team at Ray, and they have a pledge called the Ray Price Promise. It's guaranteed that the price you see online is the price you pay when you go into the dealership. We found that in many cases, other dealers will raise the price on you when you go into the dealership, saying things like, are you a recent college grad? Are you active in the military? Are you a farmer? And in most cases, the answer will be no. And that's when the other dealers will raise the price on you, saying the price online includes limited rebates that you do not qualify for. At Ray, this is not the case. The price you see online is the price you pay. No add-ons to the price ever. In fact, Ray will do everything possible to find additional savings for you, which makes the price lower than you see online. And as one of the top sellers in the Midwest, you'll always be able to shop one of Chicagoland's largest inventories. And right now, you can save big at Ray Chevy during their truck or treat savings event, because 0% is back and now available on new Silverado trucks, the perfect tailgate vehicle. So come into Ray Chevrolet in Fox Lake and find the vehicle you've been searching for. And best of all, pay zero hidden fees with the Ray Price Promise. Visit Ray Chevrolet in Fox Lake or raychevrolet.com. Serving the community since 1963. Find new roads.
All right, Brendan. I don't know, man.
Yeah. Well, I feel bad now. We always do this. Like, you etch out the direction as like, oh, it's like, it's doable and everything. But the more you talk about it, like, we sound like a bunch of crazy people saying, we're gonna expect all this.
Look,
That's absurd.
It's not an easy thing necessarily, right? Like, I think it's always easy to compare things to kind of that off season heading into 2016 when the Cubs end up winning the World Series.
World Series, correct? Yes.
Because it's easy to look back in that and say, you see how they kind of identified things that they wanted to put them over the top, right? They bring in one of the most consistent hitters and a versatile defender in Ben Zobrist, just an absolute professional, right? To
World
pair
Series
along with
MVP.
all of these young hitters, some of whom had insane talent and production, but still young, right? So how do you balance that? You go and get like the most stable lineup force you can possibly find, right? You bring in Jason Hayward. Again, you had better visions for his offense, but even so, you're getting a Gold Glove defender, an elite base runner, again, another veteran, right? Who obviously has a very significant and much talked about veteran moment,
You're so kind.
several months
You're
later,
so kind.
right? I said you'd vision different things for his offense.
Are you going to talk about the pitching that they had?
Well, you
John
also
Lester, Jake Arrieta,
he's already there. I'm talking
Kyle
about the
Hendricks.
moves they made. You do also in that offseason bring in John Lackey so that you have another back end guy, another veteran, a guy with a championship pedigree, right? Who can be that, fourth guy in that rotation to kind of stabilize things. And it was easy going into that to say, all right, you feel really good about the 2015 team. So much young talent. This pipeline is exploding, right? They just won 97 games. They won a wild card game. They won a division series against their rival. They knocked out the Cardinals, right? Like,
Thanks for looking up.
What do we need to put this team at the World Series level? And they went and did it. And then when the bullpen was showing some cracks, they went and did it again at the deadline, right? It was easy to kind of see like, okay, here's step 1, 2, 3, profit, right? Yeah. There you go. This one is not as easy, right? Or if you did lay it out, getting steps 1 through 4, easier said than done, right? Even if you know what they are. But that's the cycle, man. They're going to have to look at who they believe they can get significant production from as far as young guys, and I think the development of guys like Jordan Wicks, the ability of Javier Assad to potentially play whatever role you ask of him, things like that, like those are big developments because they help answer some of those questions. But as far as getting over this hump, like, yeah, man, it is not easy, but I just don't see what other choice they have. I mean, if there is a scenario where Cody Bellinger gets some monster offer from the New York Yankees, hypothetically, right? And he says, you know what, I'm going to take this deal because it's crazy. They're offering me crazy money, crazy years. And we're all sitting here in a vacuum saying, you know what, I get why Jed doesn't want to do that. I have no idea how this team figures that out and how this front office figures that out.
That's another issue.
But what I'm saying is like what is the other what's the other choice
for this
front office?
That's
They're going
to
have to get creative and make it work. You've built up all this prospect capital. You're going to have to trade some of it then. You're going to have to trade certain guys and maybe get teams to throw in money so that you can spend it elsewhere. There just isn't another choice, Brendan. And I know that's like just snap your fingers and make a good team, right? Like, but this is where they're at. If they want to get better, if they want to reach their stated goals, they're going to have to do some of these things. There just isn't a choice.
Yeah, well, that's my point. That's what keeps me up at night. That's why I text you this late at night, because those are difficult asks. And the rotation, the problem that the issue, the cause of concern that I have is Cody Bellinger is going to demand a big contract. He has Scott Boras. There are teams that need center fielders. Then you have to talk about weighing the risk and the reward with giving Cody Bellinger center field money with assuming your best prospect and Pete Kerr Armstrong is going to be playing center field, right? And then you start thinking, okay, well, Strome is coming back at $23 million next year. Kyle Hendricks, $16 million in a vacuum.
But yeah.
Well, Kyle Hendricks, $16 million seems in a vacuum like a slam dunk, but he has a shoulder capsular tear, but he's getting up there in age and hasn't thrown close to 200 innings in a long time. And do you want to spend $16 million on that or diversify and shore up some other holes in your roster? Again, in a vacuum, Kyle makes so much sense, but when you start playing more so in the specific context of this team and payroll situation, it's very muddy. And You look at even Justin Steele, who had remarkable development to be in the Cy Young conversation. Still, nevertheless, no history of 200 plus innings. No history of doing this without any hiccups throughout the year. I love Justin Steele. I love the development. It is the gold standard for any pitching prospect to achieve what Justin Steele achieved given his pitching stuff, making the most out of their repertoire. Absolutely the gold standard. But he still had forearm problems last year. Still took him away from 3 starts. You still have to consider all of this. And even with Cody Bellinger, to go back on the risk and all the reward, Cody Bellinger's had 2 extreme seasons where he's been among the worst hitters in the league. So you give Cody Bellinger 25, 30 million, you have to account for the possibility, although not likely at this point, but nevertheless the possibility that it could happen again. Then what? And that's, you have a lot of then what's, what ifs. There's a lot of extreme examples of these players with injuries not performing. It leaves me unsettled. That's what I'll say. I think it's possible. Again, I'm optimistic. I really am optimistic about this direction going forward because of the volume of prospects, but it's under the assumption that they will be used either via trade or excessively and aggressively graduated to the team next year. It will take an extreme in one way or the other, through in the system or through trades.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm with you. Look, like I said, like Jed Hoyer has been the president of this team for a few years now, and he doesn't really have anything to show for it. And by doesn't really, I mean he has nothing to show for it, like literally nothing.
Yeah, we talk about Craig Breslow, man. If this team does not win the division or look as if they are clear-cut division contenders, he's gone. There's like no doubt in my mind he's gone. 1 year left. He does not want to be a lame duck. There will be, in my mind, will be a mutual parting. He has to win that division and do it convincingly. There's
I
no
think
other alternative.
It's true for David Ross too. David Ross is on a 1 year deal.
Bro, the entire system. This is it for them. The seat is hotter than it's ever been. Let's go. So go get me Juan Soto. What are we doing? Am I wrong about that? Is that an excessive way to think about this? Like sometimes I do think I'm crazy to think about this.
No, I don't think so at all.
I'm not being dramatic. I swear to God, these are like legitimate things that I'm actually thinking about.
I don't think it's being dramatic. I think, again, like I said, I think when most people talk about this, I don't feel like they're painting it as this like super easy thing to get to that next level. It's gonna be complicated. You can use whatever kind of like cliche you want. Like it's an advanced like chess game. You know what I mean? And Jed has to be really good at it. They're all gonna have to be really good at it. Not easy. So yeah, I mean that's ultimately where it is. And anyway, yada yada yada. Flash forward, Nick Madrigal, your opening day third base.
No. Dude, I can't do it. The only way I accept that is Cody Bellinger, Juan Soto, and let's get crazy. Just throw in like Aaron Nola in that mix. I don't know. Let's get super crazy. If Nick Madrigal is your opening day third baseman,
there's no scenario where I accept that.
I can't have that happen again, dude. I just can't do it.
Give Christopher Morel a bucket of balls and somebody with a fungo, please.
I will personally go to his house every day. I will hit him 1,000 fungos every day. I promise you.
Look, I do think it's good to kind of, I wanted to lay that groundwork at least a little bit, not to frighten everybody, but just to, kind of hone in on some of this stuff. And again, the exact numbers and, payroll projection, thing like that, like a lot of that can change. It's based on arbitration projections, whether they're picking up some of these options, whether they're not picking up some of these options. So it depends how you're looking at it and calculating things. But the fact of the matter is that if you make certain moves just to kind of keep the roster where it was, it's not the most room unless they are willing to really go into those luxury tax penalties, which we just don't know whether that is something they're going to do or not. Every time they're asked, I think Tom's answer is always like, Jed knows how much money, or Jed has the money to do what he needs to do, right? Or something vague like that, right? And as you said, we've seen this before where you needed more spending and it didn't happen, right? So I think it's good to kind of lay this groundwork because I think a lot of people, as you said, Brendan, feel good about this organization and feel good about where they ended up last year, even though we're falling short of calling it a success because they didn't make the playoffs. They bought at the deadline and obviously collapsed in September the way that they did. But it's good to just set the kind of tone of like, there is a lot of work to do. And it is not just snap your fingers kind of work, right? And, in addition to that, even if you had a best laid plan to get there, right? Talking re-sign Cody Bellinger, go get, Aaron Nola, trade for Juan Soto. They're not the only people that want to do that, right? Like that's the other, thing that I think sometimes gets left out of this conversation. Other people want Cody Bellinger. If there's a trade for Juan Soto happening, other people besides Jed Hoyer might be on the phone to make that happen. Other teams are watching Aaron Nola, right? Who didn't have his best regular season, but the dude shows up in October. Jed Hoyer's not the only one that's interested in his services, right? So even if you have the plan, even if you have the money, right, you're competing with people. You have to outbid people. You have to woo some of these, potential free agents and things like that, right? It's not the easiest process. So I think it's good to just sort of set the tone of like, there's a lot of work to do. They can do it. They have to do it. But, it's not the simplest thing in the world to get this team to where they want to be. Now, again, if in an ideal world, Tom opens the checkbook, the payroll's $400 million, sure, it's a lot easier. Yeah, we can make that happen. Definitely a lot easier if that were to be the case. It won't be, right? People don't want to hear about those luxury tax levels and those penalties and stuff, but they're going to consider them whether we like it or not. So it's just a fair thing to lay out there, I think. One more ad break for you as we're over the hour mark. So, we do have to keep the lights on here if Brendan and I are just going to talk to each other all night. As always, want to invite you guys to check out becoming a diehard member over at CHGO. You can visit allchgo.com. Obviously, you guys know we have podcasts and live shows on every team every day. Post-game shows, premium written content over at allchgo.com. Some unlocked, some is locked just for the diehard members. You get 20% off all events. We just had another tailgate before a Bears game here in the city of Chicago. The goose is flowing. The food is flowing. There's bacon. There's beer. There's camaraderie, community. Everything you need. They're great tailgates. They're really great events to come out and meet some folks, get ready for a football game. I know we are going to have some Blackhawks events, obviously now that the Connor Bedard show is underway. Some Bulls events once the Chicago Bulls season gets underway. Access to the members-only Discord. You get a free shirt when you become a member. And at the next two tailgates, X Golf will be giving away a $200 gift certificate to any of their Chicagoland locations. You can find the X Golf nearest you at playxgolf.com/Chicagoland. At that last tailgate, I think that was last weekend, did have our first winner of the X Golf gift certificate. So got to visit those tailgates for the next couple opportunities. Again, allchgo.com. And then our last sponsor, a favorite, as always. All of our sponsors are our favorites, but you guys know Goose Island has been supporting CHGO, and it is Chicago's beer since 1988. The incredible beer roster, Oktoberfest, the Beer Hug family, the Full Pocket Pilsner. That was what was in Cody Delmendo's beer bat after Dr. Brendan Miller gave him the tip for a little lighter, easier to slam in that particular environment with a plastic beer bat from Wrigley Field. And of course, my favorite, the classic, the 312. They have a cooler like right behind my seats at beautiful historic Wrigley Field, Brendan. They have the grill with the hot dogs, the caramelized onions. I will tell you a little inside baseball. That is not the grill that I go to, though. I will not reveal the best hot dog location inside Wrigley Field.
I know where it's at.
Shall I say maybe. But next to that stand is a cooler that is always stocked with pristine crisp 312 wheat ale from Goose Island. You walk up, they have the self-checkouts now. I go up a few rows, grab my 312, back to my seats in 10 seconds. There's no better way to enjoy a ball game at beautiful historic Wrigley Field. And, of course, you can grab ultra-fresh brewery-exclusive beers at the Goose Island Original Brew House on Clybourne Avenue in Lincoln Park. They have a great smash burger there as well, or from their tap room on Fulton Street in Westtown. Of course, Goose Island Beer Company, Chicago's beer. All right, Brendan, wrapping up here, or we could go another 3 hours.
Okay, we can do it.
Doesn't really matter.
Sure.
I'm excited for this offseason. I think that, again, laying out the difficulties and maybe not being able to kind of map it all ourselves with some of those difficulties, the team is on an upward trajectory, and Jed knows, I think, what is necessary to make this team better. The one thing, they don't always make those moves, but I feel like, and this was true of Theo as well, like the two of them will point out what is wrong with the team. That is one thing that I feel is true for both of them, right? There's been instances where they would say stuff and then they don't fix it, and that kind of, gets us all to be a little confused, right? Like, well, why did you point that out and then you didn't do it? We don't hit enough home runs, but we're not going to add any home run hitters, so don't ask us about that, right? But, when you listen to Jed Hoyer's end of the year press conference, he talked about a lot of the things that you would want him to say in order to be hopeful that the team gets better, right? He talked about how they needed more impact bats to change a game in one swing rather than relying. They have a lot of good complementary hitters, a lot of guys that can string hits together, take their walks, etc. But you need more of those guys that just do damage. And you're seeing that especially in these playoffs. Guys like Yordan Alvarez, Kyle with the Phillies, Harper, like, damage, just doing damage with one swing rather than relying on those big sustained rallies that maybe carry you through a 162-game season, but don't necessarily always help you navigate the playoffs just as easily. He's acknowledged these things. He's acknowledged that you'd like the pitching staff to see more swing and miss, and that the bullpen depth wasn't there, and that was a mistake on their part, and that they made mistakes on some of those depth signings throughout the roster. Doesn't mean that they're going to go and fix it, but they know what this team needs to do to reach that next level and to get better. And as we talked about, like, the manager is on the hot seat. The manager might be on the hot seat from the jump, right? Just given his contract and the way everything is kind of set up here. The president should be on the hot seat if things aren't different next year, because they don't have anything to show for the last few years. So I'm excited for this offseason not because I'm positive that it is perfectly executed, but the opportunity is there for this team to continue taking those next steps and put themselves in a better position than us coming to the end of the season and talking about, like, oh, well, they were close, to making the playoffs, whatever. It's there. They know what they need to do, whether they want to use them or admit it. They have the resources. We know it. Yeah. They have the money to do whatever they need to do to get there. And I'm ultimately, possibly to a fault, hopeful that they will find themselves there.
The good going forward is you see the direction. Yes, it's ambitious. Yes, it seems almost unlikely, but high volume, top prospects in the top 50 rankings, whatever leaderboards you want to use, multiple, in some cases, 6, 7 in the top 100 of your prospects. That can be used in trades. You saw graduations for Pete Crow-Armstrong this season. Jordan Wicks was a significant contributor. Javier Assad broke through. You have your core up the middle signed for the next 3 seasons in Dansby and Nico, whom are likely going to win Gold Gloves. You have Miguel Amaya breaking through, looking like a potential stable catcher behind the dish. Jan Gomes as a formidable mentor for Miguel Amaya. You can see it working out. Seiya Suzuki, hoping he puts up second half numbers next season, is every bit what you expected when that contract was signed, and then some. And Ian Happ for the contract, $20 million per year. not your middle of the order guy, but still a great complementary piece that's locked and ready for the next 3 seasons. The foundation, as Jess said, the skeleton is there. The skeleton is just as is what it was called, a skeleton. It's pretty bare, it needs to be filled up. And the way that's going to happen, I think, is ambitiously making those trades, saying goodbye with a lot of angst to the Kevin Alcantaras, to the James Triantos. I don't think Cade Horton, but you never know. I don't think PCA, but you never know. Saying goodbye to this high volume of prospects and taking some risk and doing it and hoping it works out. And that's what I'm hoping happens, is we take those risks and continue to make those strides forward and at least risk it. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay, there you go.
It's a big ask.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay, bye.
All right. Good talking to you.
No, look, we got a couple weeks. Obviously, they have to wrap up the championship series, and you got to play the World Series. And then, I think once we get into the World Series, we'll kind of lay out all of those dates, for when you can expect things. Going to have to submit arbitration offers, tender contracts, all that other stuff. And then the gates open. Free agency, trades, all that stuff. So that is what we have for you. Obviously, don't forget to tune in Monday through Thursday, usually at 1:20, unless there's a sort of special interview or event with Cody, Ryan, and Luke. They are in the middle of doing their grades for some of the players as they'll kind of carry that throughout the offseason. I know that Brendan is hoping to join the Nick Madrigal grade episode. I don't know how many Fs have ever been given out during those grades, but expect we might see one if you do join that show.
Not from Ryan. Not from
you.
Ryan. From me, yeah, but from Ryan.
That's what I'm saying.
He'll give Madrigal probably a B+. And he'll cite that
let's not
plus
start a
10
fight.
outs above average because he takes a 3-meter run throw to get to first base from the bullpen out in left field in the bleachers underneath the ivy, even on the waveland.
Good. Great. What I was hoping was that at the 80-minute mark of this podcast, we could get into a loose. I was going to say unsolicited, but
that
I
was
did
kind of
solicit
mean
it.
to say about me. I give the guy credit. Like, he did play a good third
We don't have
base.
to do this.
Don't get me wrong. All right.
He's not listening to this.
All right.
So it
We
doesn't
never know. You never know.
Anyway, that is what we have for you. We would appreciate if you can hit that thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. As a reminder, we are not live. We have not been live. If you've been waiting for us to respond to you, we can't see the future. But
You respond to all those chats, though, all those
yes,
comments. I see that.
We are reading the chats. If you leave a comment on the YouTube video and it, warrants or would like a reply, I will reply.
Do you reply to the Corey sucks comments?
I don't think we get any of those.
Oh,
do we?
Okay. I don't think
Or
so.
is that you? I mean, maybe I've blocked your burner. I don't know.
Maybe you have, actually.
Look, this is the tail end of a podcast that, at this point people may have tuned out of. We'll take any and all feedback, right? Like if there's stuff you want us to talk about, let us know. Stuff you don't want us to talk about, let us know. And I know you were joking, but to that point, like if you think we suck, tell us why. Don't just say that. That doesn't help us get any better.
Well, I can't change my voice. This is what it is. So
yes, that's also true. Like
Yeah.
I, have a nasally voice. I don't know what to tell you about that.
Yeah.
Like I can't fix that for you.
I
But
have tight vocal cords.
if there is legitimate criticism or stuff like that, like let us know. Try to put it in a, constructive manner, right? But that is one of those things. Like sometimes in those, the live YouTube chats or whatever, we appreciate everybody watching and commenting. But if you hate us, tell us why. Maybe we can get better, right? Like unless you don't have no interest in us
You're
getting
in
better.
a
But
chipper
like,
mood today. You're in a good mood today.
well, I mean, it's true though, right? Like
tell us why we suck. We like it.
if it can be constructive, right? Everybody can always get better. And if you actually mean it and you have a constructive thought, hit us with it, or if you have a positive thought, hit us with it. We always need an ego boost. I like getting my ego inflated. So
You look good today.
thanks. Not from,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I get it from you all the time. We need it from other people. But regardless, we do appreciate you listening or watching, however you're consuming the CHGO Cubs podcast. Brendan and I will be with you next Friday. As I said, don't forget to tune in at 1:20 every day on the CHGO Sports YouTube page. For Luke, Cody, and Ryan, the rest of the CHGO Cubs team, I think they have some more interviews lined up for next week, so it should be a good slate of shows for next week. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Brendan and I will talk to you next week. And whether we are battling out a September collapse or watching a bunch of former players try to win a World Series in Philadelphia, as always, go Cubs.
Go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.